Okay, to work this problem here, first off, I wanted to fill in the charts. Our problem is really this: which one of these is a decay? In other words, which one of those is going to be growing smaller instead of larger? Well, one thing that we can do is this here. What is 8 divided by 4 is the same thing as a 2. That's going to happen on every single one of those, which will help make the math a little bit faster and quicker. And if I was to plug all these in, like f of negative 1 of 2 times basically 2 to the negative 1 power, well, that's 2 times 1/2, which will cancel out and make a 1. Here we're going to have, when you do it to the 0 power, remember anything to the 0 power becomes 1, so that's 2 times 1 makes that 2. So now we have f of 1, 2 times 2 to the first power will be 2 times 2, which will be 4. F of 2 will be 2 times 2 squared, which would be 2 times 4, which makes 8. And I can already tell that this one is a growth because look at all the numbers. They are actually what? Getting bigger. It's going to be 2 times 8, which makes it 16. This one's actually a growth. And another way I can tell is this. Even though that was a fraction, 8/4, the fraction was larger than greater than 1. I mean, 8/4 is greater than 1, which is the same thing as 2. So I know that it is a growth. Just looking at that part right there, I probably already got a pretty good idea that which one of these is not a growth and which one is an exponential decay. So let's look at this one right over here. Now this 2.5, you know, if you plug in, it says y equals here. So basically, if you have 1/2x times 2.5 to the negative 1 power, which would be the same, it has 1/2 times 1 over 2.5, which should be the same thing as 1 over 5, which makes it a 0.2. 0.2. Here you're going to have y is 1/2 times 2.5 to the 0 power, which basically means you're going to have 1/2 times 1, which will make the answer 1/2 or 0.5. I can already tell it's going up. This one's going to be a what? Growth. Also look at that. 2.5 is larger than 1, so I know this is going to be a growth. And if I keep going here, just to put in the numbers, you have 1/2 times 2.5 to the first power, which would be the same thing as 1/2 times 2.5. And 2.5 was 1/2 would be the same thing as taking 2.5, dividing it by 2, which will make it 1.25. Okay, do the other one, 1/2 times 2.5 to the second power, which I think 2.25 to the second power will end up being 6.25. Then you have to multiply it by 1/2 or divide it by 2, which will make it then 3.125. And then this last one will be 1/2 times 2.5 to the third power, which would be the same thing as about 15 point, and I'm trying to do this in my head, 2.5 to the third power is 6.25 times 2.5, which I'm thinking is going to be 15, 7, 14, 15.625, I think, which when you cut that in half will be 7.8125. Anyway, those are all exponential growths. Let's look at this one right here. And let's do this here. We have 3/4 times 3/4 times 2 to basically the negative 1, which will be 3/4 times 1/2, which will be the same thing as 3/8. And 3/8 is the same thing as 0.375. So now I'm going to take 3/4 times 2 to the 0 power, which means it will be 3/4 times 1, which means my answer will be 3/4 or it will be 0.75. And if you want to add a 0 to make it look like the same number there, I can tell this one's already also a what? Growth. So let's go ahead and do all the numbers. 3/4 times 2 to the first. Well, that's going to be the same as 3/4 times 2, which will be 6/4, which will be 3/2 or 1.5, okay? And this one here will be 3/4 times 2 squared, which is 4, so 3/4 times 4. 4s will cancel, giving me an answer of 3. And then you have 3/4 times 2 to the third, which will be the same as 3/4 times 8, which that will end up being 2/1, making that a 6. It's definitely a growth. So I already know my decay is probably going to be which one. And looking at this part here that it's a 3/4, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be it. And what's going to happen is this here. If you take 2 times 3/4 to the -1 power, it's the same thing as 2 times 4/3, because you're going to flip those, which is the same thing as 8/3, which will be 2.666 repeating, or we'll round it to 7. 2 times 3/4 to the 0 power is going to make it, anything to the 0 power is going to make it a 1. 2 times 1 is 2. I already know this is going down, so this one is a decay. Let's go ahead and find out all the other answers. So now I'm going to have 2 times 3/4 to the first power, which will be 2 times 3/4, which will be 6/4, which will be the same thing as 1.5, 3/2, which is 1.5. Still getting smaller. Now you have 3/4 squared, which will be the same as 2 times 9/16, which will be the same thing as 9/8 when you reduce it, which will be the same thing as 1.125. And then the other one will be 2 times 3/4 to the third, which will be the same thing as 2 times 27/64, which is the same thing as 27/32. Just 2 are going to 64 32 times. And that one I'm going to get a calculator out and divide and get 0.8375. And notice each one of these is getting smaller. This one is my decay. But the way I could have found it very quickly is simply, notice, look at that. 2.5 is greater than 1. 2 is greater than 1. That 2 is greater than 1. But here, we actually have 3/4, and 3/4 is less than 1, but greater than 0, so it is a decay. That's the fast way that you can tell right away whether it's a growth or a decay. Another thing I could have done to help find all these numbers is gone to my y equal in the calculator and plugged these numbers in, the formulas, and could have seen which one of the numbers were getting what, whether they're getting bigger or whether they were getting smaller, and still could have filled out that answer chart just like the following and done it a lot quicker probably.